Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this webinar. I have a chance to introduce to you Dr. Leonna and Leonna Luc as part of this webinar series we're doing at SACE. And it's a follow-up from our STEM Connect conference we did last fall. And for some of you that had a chance to come and wanted a chance to dig deeper into this conversation, this is for you. But we're not just reviewing the information, we're kind of extending it. We're having an opportunity to ask deeper questions. Maybe for those of you that didn't get a chance to come, for you to be able to be a part of that conversation that we had a chance to do. So with that, yeah, Jan, Leona, how was the conference for you?
I can go first. Yeah, thanks, Jim, so much for hosting this webinar and also moderating. And thank you, everyone who is showing up. Some of you we know and we love you. And for those we don't know yet, we still love you for attending. And we're really happy to be here. You know, the conference itself, I felt incredibly. I mean, I was on a high for, I don't know how many weeks after the conference. It was so motivating and inspiring because of the positive energy that was there amongst all the professionals and the leaders who showed up and the executives and all the other coaches and trainers who showed up. So I have a special place in my heart for that conference. It was a super positive experience.
Yeah.
Leona?
Thank you, Jan. And same, I echo what Jan said. There's always something about being in community with other professionals, right, who are there to just connect with one another, but also, grow themselves as leaders. So I think Jan and I had a really great time being able to present the workshops that we presented on, and I think we felt really touched by, I think, all of the participation and feedback that we've received from the conference, and being able to create that space for everybody. So yeah, it was such a great time, and it was awesome to meet a lot of other folks in person too. So like we got to meet Jim in person, and that's always a great time.
Mhm.
Yeah, so good to have you there. And, I had a chance to step in to your space. And what I really found was the participants were engaging, they're having deep conversations, and
Mhm.
everyone really had an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think that has to do with a lot about your organization. You guys are both the co-founders of Radiance Leadership, and your goal is to really design healthy company cultures that empower people to really achieve, I think, greater excellence and maybe even what they
Mhm.
thought they had.
Mhm.
So, for those that have not had a chance to meet you or get to know you, tell a little bit more about yourselves and Radiance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Leona. I have the PowerPoint up.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jan. And thanks for the intro, Jim. So I am one of the co-founders for Radiance, and how I really got started in my work is I was always driven by this passion for wanting to bridge the gap for access to opportunities. And that led me into getting into HR, doing D&I work, and then now being able to work with organizations in developing programming, creating operation or refining operations and infrastructure that allow for strong community spaces to happen and that feed into things that play into creating a more inclusive culture.
Mhm.
So, that really ties into the work that Jan and I do in Radiance Leadership, because we recognize that it's not just about supporting our community. We could provide the resources and the space to elevate everyone in our community, but it really doesn't mean anything if there isn't a space for them to thrive. And that's really what inspired us to do more around working with organizations and creating more effective and inclusive cultures
Mhm.
on the Radiance leadership side.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add on to what Leona is saying, our mission is really to design healthy company cultures that empower people to achieve excellence. And that has always been a passion of mine because I worked in leadership development, I worked in organization development for many large, complex organizations with over hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And in order to stand out, amongst that sea of people, you have to have core competencies that are tied to managing yourself, leading others, and then also impacting the organization in a healthy way.
Mhm.
So, some of what we're going to be talking about is around those three capabilities that are incredibly important to you as professionals, and also something that Leonna and I mean, we can talk for hours about it because we get so psyched about healthy cultures and creating inclusive work environments. And I can hand it back over to Jim so that we can continue with this
Yeah.
awesome experience that you've created for us.
Well, one of the things that have brought me into this space also is that shared experience of being in large corporations. I was like one of 250,000, right?
Hmm.
And realizing like I felt like it put me in a situation where the corporate culture created a dog eat dog world, a zero-sum game. Like I was just a member of Survivor, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't like that culture because it didn't helped me to thrive. And in a way, I felt like I had to step on my coworkers in order for me to hit my own goals, right? And I
Hmm.
don't think that's necessarily the case. And so at the conference, you presented three topics, and I threw those in the
Hmm.
chat box for everyone so that you can see the topics and what they did. So share with us, like, how did you land on these three topics?
So there were many different topics to choose from because of all the work that Leona and I have done separately and also together with Radiance. And, some of our work was around supporting leadership development for ERG members, supporting leadership development for people of Asian descent, and then also other underrepresented minority groups. And the other piece was around like what are specific skills that you need, and those are the three, the core competencies that came up, which is around you need to be able to help yourself so that you can help others. That's the bottom line, right? So the idea of integrating your work, your life, your identity, and not overextending on any of those three areas, and not trying to find balance, but integrating all those three areas. That's number one. You need that in order to be able to have an impact on others. So the second part was around like, how do you then, okay, if you've taken care of yourself, take care of your team so that you can all collectively do the work that you need to do in order to make your workplace better for yourself, for other teams, for the entire organization. So we saw it as like this phased approach, like yourself, others, and then the organization. And there's so much more, right, in terms of skills that you need as a professional. But those were the three that seemed to be most resonant for the STEM population that we felt that could benefit from.
Yeah, and it was important for us to show how taking care of yourselves ultimately impacts the wider organizational culture. So that's why we chose these three topics to really phase it out and show like the through line between, you know, yourself and then like, how all of these habits, these mindset shifts into you stepping in a leader and leading your team effectively can then ultimately have like a ripple effect in creating like a great, effective, and inclusive culture.
Yeah.
This is so important, I think, for each one of us
Mhm.
to feel like, it's not just a duty or like we're trapped in a job, but we can feel like we can really show up and provide the best for ourselves. And so I think there are a few questions I think you wanted to ask the audience on. And the first question that we wanted to throw out, and so Grace, Brittany, Allison, Vanessa, Gina, Aaron, and Clarence, if you could take a moment and maybe even answer in the chat box. Like, who do you think is responsible for creating a healthy company culture? Ooh, everyone's responsible. Some more than others, do you think?
I put leadership. Leadership usually sets the tone. Obviously, it's collective and it's everyone, but in Silicon Valley, we always say like people tell me they will interview for culture fit, or they said like so. One of my friends before he worked at Uber, he had worked for a smaller company in Campbell. So this is right outside of Silicon Valley. He said, I want to be in San Francisco, but I'm looking for the right culture. And I was like, what does that mean? And it's like beyond company perks of like free food. It's like, are you burning out? Like, it's like a huge thing in Silicon Valley of like, well, I want to be on a rocket ship so that I can make a lot of money. And other people are like, I don't want to do that because I actually want to sleep because some people in Silicon Valley work 80 to 100 hours a week. And they're like, we're building the future. If you can't hack it, you're not a part of our culture. Like, you're not a culture fit. So I think it starts with the founders themselves, the investors that they do pick. So when I said leadership, I mean executive leadership from the very top. And if you're not hiring, like, say, the first 50%, a diverse quote unquote team, whether it's women, people of color, whatever, it'll pattern match against the leadership and the founders. And that's actually what shapes the culture. Like, obviously, everyone's collectively responsible, but it starts from the very beginning and top,
Mhm.
quote unquote.
Mhm.
And if you don't have that, that's how you find, like, anyone, whether or not there's a justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, token affirmative action, whatever thing, like, as a template. Forget the word. Look at who the founders are that started the company or the organization, who's invested in them, who's their customers. That'll tell you everything about the culture, not just, well, do I buy it or do I work there? Think about who started it. That'll set the tone.
Jim, I think Erin kind of asked that other question, or asked and answered the other question, which is
Yeah,
around
sure.
senior leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're all right. I mean, you're all right. Depending on where you are in the phase of the organization, usually it starts with the founders, it starts with the executives. But to maintain it and to be aware of it and to make sure that it is upholded in a way that is positive for folks, it's everyone. And that's what we really emphasized during one of our workshops. And we'll continue to do that with the follow-up cohort that we're planning for. All of the When you think about this diagram, it happens at the micro level and also at the macro level. So when you think about daily habits that you as an individual, regardless of your title, regardless of your level, micro level practices and daily habits are going to have a positive impact. And Leona said this earlier, it's going to have a ripple effect going up in terms of creating a positive, healthy culture, because your ability to create environments where people, and let's talk about culture. What does it mean? It really means, like, how do people experience the environment that they walk into? It could be even the Zoom room that we've created for you. The culture that we created is one that is, open, one that's welcoming, that's encouraging, that's interactive. I mean, you can do that simply by setting the tone. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the micro level, is practicing daily habits. But when you look at the top and why this matters, culture impacts productivity and the bottom line. It does. So if you need to go back to your leadership about why you might be engaging in creating a positive culture, this is why. Because what you do at the micro level is going to have a positive effect on the macro level. And research supports this. Stock market stock prices for companies that focus on culture supports this. So it is, like, there is no way around this. So we are, again, very passionate about creating healthy cultures. Team dysfunction can get in the way of that part, right? So how many times have you been on a team? And Erin mentioned this, it's like there could be an environment where they're looking for a particular culture fit. That is not the right way to bring people on board, because what if the team environment is toxic? What if there are people on the team that are not ideal leaders? If you're looking for that culture fit, and you're looking for a particular personality type or a profile, that's just going to perpetuate the team dysfunction that could exist. And then the other part is around, we said this before, you can create an upward positive momentum to influence others to create an effective team culture. And then, what we shared at the workshop, what we share, we will continue to share today. And also as part of the cohort is, you just need some context and a couple of action steps that you yourself can take so that you can have this positive ripple effect going up. Is there anything to add to that, Leona?
Yeah, I just wanted to call out some things that were in the chat. I know Clarence put being collaborative. Gina, serving a multicultural population can be a matter of focus in the midst of focusing on culture, and to impact team culture takes communication and inclusion. So all of what both of you said, and in addition to other habits that you might have seen by a leader that you felt like was leading the team in a functional and effective way, those are all part of like the micro level practicing of the daily habits that
Yeah.
can be incorporated in the day to day of like how you show up as a leader and how you lead the team.
I was going to draw upon what you shared, and again, if anybody else has some thoughts, Grace, Brittany, love to hear yours, what you're doing. But when you have a toxic work environment, it's really hard sometimes to not let it go downhill, right? And
Yeah.
because it's so like what they say, like what you get is what you give. And I think it takes good leadership to shift that mindset. And so I am sometimes surprised when I hear people work for certain corporations that tend to have negative press, right? And I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, I did not expect someone so healthy or someone so um like so indexed on those type of values to work for a
Yeah.
place like that, because like it could definitely impact them negatively. And plus, like I could only imagine like people that work for those places um, may get that from like that type of leadership, right? So, for example,
Yeah.
if let's say Brittany works for a toxic corporation that I've heard negative things about, like, oh my gosh, I must like every employee under Brittany also probably feels that way, which is not necessarily true because good, healthy leaders have the ability to do things. And maybe even just following up on the question, like, what is the one thing that individuals do to impact team culture is you can filter forward, you can
Mhm.
push back on some things and really help drive like how you can lead your team and feel like you have ownership in the team, but not just abdicate on it and just like be a messenger, so to speak, of letting
Yeah.
things go. So yeah, I didn't know if there was anything to that, Leona or Jan, that you wanted to pull out more specifically to maybe our viewers can feel empowered.
Yeah. One thing, so not one thing, but one of the main things around is around building trust. And I think that's what, we're trying to circle, but we're going to really emphasize is being able to create trust will mitigate the team dysfunction. Being able to create trust amongst, one-on-one conversations that will also help with um, people coming to you if there is a problem, right? Or you feeling like you could go somewhere else or speak to your manager, your leadership team about things that need to be addressed, in terms of the culture. So trust is such an important part of creating healthy cultures. And the other thing that I want to mention is that sometimes when you think about this macro level, it might be really hard for you to think that this one micro level practice can impact the macro level. But there is a way to start doing that immediately. And one is around, and we're going to give you a tip on this actually. It's about trust through apologizing, but not apologizing for something you've done, but apologizing for the situation. So there was a fascinating study that was done, a psychological study that was done, and it was around strangers coming up to other strangers and asking this question. It in a train station where it was raining. So scenario one was someone going up to someone else when it's raining at a train station and saying, "Can I borrow your phone?" Scenario number two was, "I'm so sorry about the rain. Can I borrow your phone?" Those two scenarios, which of the two scenarios do you think was more effective? One or two? One or two?
People want to put a
Two.
finger up? Man.
They're saying two. Okay. So why is that? It's exactly what we've been talking about, like these micro moments and these environments that you create where people feel like there's a sense of trust, and apologizing for something that doesn't even apply to your own doing. Like the weather, you have nothing to, that you can do. You can't do anything about the weather, but just apologizing for it and then asking for the phone, it turned out the response rate jumped 422%.
Mm.
So imagine that, right? So if you were able to do a couple of things, and we have a couple of tips here. Say there's a scheduling mix up at work. What if you said, and you had nothing to do with sending out the invite, but what if you said, I'm sorry the invite didn't go through? It must have been a technical glitch.
Mm.
Thanks for catching it. Let's have a conversation. It wasn't your fault, but you're creating empathy. Yes, exactly. You're creating empathy. You're creating an environment where you're like, I get you. Let's move forward together. Here's another tip. What if there's some sort of like unexpected workload shift, and we're all experiencing that right now because of AI, because of, you know, the disruption in general in the workplace, people being laid off, restructured, what have you. What if you said, I'm sorry this landed on your plate so suddenly? Again, you have no say in this. You just are recognizing that there's a lot of work. I'm sorry this landed on your plate so suddenly. Let's figure out a way to make it manageable. Just saying those two things in a situation where you're apologizing for the environment that's been created will help to build trust. And that is going to be the one thing that's going to help you with the other aspects of this funnel. Leona likes to call it the funnel of culture from the micro to the macro level.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out, Brittany mentioned acknowledging shared experience, and I think part of building empathy is that acknowledgement, right? Regardless of who is accountable for what happened, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to the human experience, we're all seeking to be seen and heard, and that acknowledgement allows us to feel seen and heard, which then plays into being able to build trust with that other person.
Mhm. Awesome.
Yeah, a lot of good comments in the chat box. And, Vanessa mentioned about like ways that we can also set boundaries to help people be aware. And I responded like, and sometimes, at least for my culture, like not speaking up was like a value. And unfortunately, at times, like not speaking up was also seen as a weakness, or like, what's the term? Like silence is acceptance at times, right?
Mhm.
And we can sometimes allow other people to believe that unreasonable requests that we are complacent to become the norm if we don't speak otherwise, right? And then so
Mhm.
we create that culture. And I do think
Yeah.
like accidentally, that can also impact other people around us to think like, oh, Grace is there till like 7 o'clock every night. And I feel like I have to stay till 7 o'clock, or else, Brittany's gonna think that I'm not as hard of a worker as Grace. And
Mhm.
and those like self thoughts can create those toxic cultures that we believe exist, even though it might
Mhm.
not exist.
Yeah.
We just believe it in a way. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, and and I know we're talking about culture quite a bit right now, and the reason for that is because you can make a difference, you can make a difference in the organizational cultures that you're currently in. It doesn't have to sit just with the leadership. You can start to create positive ripples. We firmly believe that, and these little tips that we just shared with you will help with it. And we hope that you experiment because and come back to us and let us know how it went. All
yeah.
right.
And I think that kind of goes towards a mindset. And I think you've talked about
Mm-hmm.
like how do we move from being a doer to a leader?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question that we had, what holds back people from accelerating in your careers? And, love to hear from each one of you. Like, what are some of those things?
Yeah.
Like, whether it's you feel like the culture is it, or we don't have enough time in our lives. But, these can be things that kind of help us to kind of think about what are the restraints that we have, perceived or
Yeah.
real, that maybe prevent us from being, more of a leadership mindset. So, do you have something to kind of share
Mm-hmm.
upon that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more from everyone here. What comes to mind when you think about what might be holding people back from accelerating in their careers? I see Clarence put workload, complacency, fear of failure. I think that is a huge one. Clarence, do you want to expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, in a more general sense, sometimes it just feels like, you know, your day job, kind of your responsibilities and duties can be so overwhelming that you're just like, I don't have headspace to do anything else than just what, you know, um, and maybe it's that fear of failure. It's like, okay, this is what I'm being paid for, right? This is my lane, this is my, you know, my responsibility. That's all I can do right now. And then maybe also a function of, you know, I'm 0 to 5 years in my career and I'm building that versus I'm 15, 20 years in, right? And so, you know, work life gets in, you know, that gets in the way too. Well, not in the way, but you know, right? The other is just complacency, right? And so I think there are, you know, I put in the comments earlier, natural born leaders, right? And just
Yeah.
who are you know, they're just wired that way to go, right? And to be bold and courageous. And then there are others that, you know, I'm just perfectly happy, clam, where I am, right? And maybe that's inherently a limiter in their own way, right? Um, so those are kind of my thoughts there that I had initially reacted to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Clarence. And we're seeing a lot of kind of similar themes in the chat too around staying in our comfort zone, lack of visibility, limitations that we might set on ourselves. And I know Gina also mentioned that sometimes acceleration in our career might have to do with other factors that are outside of our control too. And that is also true, right? I think that what Jan and I like to really emphasize are all the things that we have within our power to grow and develop ourselves as leaders. And a lot of the things around, you know, wanting to, I think, Clarence, you talked a little bit about making space to being able to like step out of your comfort zone, right? Or maybe do more of what we want to do. If you think about, you know, if you're currently in a position where you feel like you're doing more of, you're in more of like a doer role, what needs to happen in order for you to make that space?
Some good comments following up on that. Like, what are some self-limiting beliefs Grace mentions in our capabilities that provide some external restrictions without opportunities being present? And then also, you know, sometimes the people around us, right? Not having great mentors around that Brittany mentioned, as well as like the company culture or the corporate ladder that we have to climb. So, some good follow-up thoughts and comments. You know, I threw in the chat box on the scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, how comfortable are you about delegation?
That's good.
And I see a lot of fours, 4.5
That's great.
threes. Yeah, what do you
That is
think?
great.
Yeah, 4 to 5, depending on the
Yes.
situation.
Can you clarify the scale again? Oh,
Yeah,
can you
five
repeat the
being
scale
like
again?
the highest. Would you say like 1 is being not comfortable and then 5
hmm
being really comfortable?
Yeah.
Oh, delegating.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah, so a lot of 3, 4s.
Yeah, and I said, if I'm being honest, I'm like sometimes the worst. You know, I say, you know, and if my wife, you know, I share this, and there's a golden key book that I little red hen myself, right? And I basically like, dang it, I'm just going to do it myself, right? And that's not good. It's not healthy, but I sometimes fall into that, right?
Yeah, and we believe that sometimes, you know, and there's so many reasons. A lot of different things came up in our workshop on transitioning from a doer to leader, but a lot of it was centered around delegation, which seems in theory like a simple class. It's like a simple task where we just have to, you know, pass it on to someone. But there's so much around like your mindset and shift that has to happen in order to effectively do that, right? Like Clarence just gave a perfect example of, I think it's easier if I just do it myself, or it'll be able to, the outcome will be closer aligned to what I envisioned it to be, right?
But that's not always healthy, right? And it's not sustainable. I know that, but sometimes I'm like, oh.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that ultimately signifies like though delegation is, it seems it conceptually can seem like a simple thing, there is so much behind it in order to effectively delegate, and that will allow you to step into this role as a leader in however you want to define being a leader might mean for you. So delegation, not only does it provide you the space like to do the things that you need to focus on more as a leader, whether it's so if we were to backtrack a little bit, if you were to think about the role of a doer, they're typically someone that's more focused on like executing, right? They're more project oriented, a little bit more focused on the attention to details and the accuracy of what's going on. And then in a leader role, especially if you're managing a team or managing or working with a lot of collaborators, you're more focused on the success of the people that you're working with. And you're probably more focused on the bigger picture of what the project is, or what the company goals are. So in order for you to make space, so that's really what delegation is about, the ability for you to make space so that you could focus on the things that you need to focus on. And then the ripple effect of delegating is that it'll also build trust, because you're giving people opportunities to step into their leadership role, right? In managing a project, or working or owning a particular task. So delegation can lead to building trust. It can lead to the feeling of ownership and autonomy for the members of your team, which all plays into what your team culture would then become. Anything to add there, Jan?
For those who are sort of like in between,
Yeah.
in terms of how comfortable they are. The other thing too that came up during our workshop, and this is definitely applicable here too. You know what? Sometimes there's this comfort level of you doing things yourself, especially in a work environment where you feel like if you do everything, you may not get laid off because you're the one who's doing everything, right? We need to get out of that mindset, because there's always going to be work. Always. We guarantee you there's always work. So start delegating. Start getting that stuff off your plate so that you can become, the leader that you're meant to be.
Well, I'll tell you, like I did that, and it's like a trap that you can set for yourself because at the same time, if you don't like, it's not about speaking up, but if you don't share your thoughts and opinions, as well as you look like someone that you can empower other people to also do the work, then you are just one of many
That's it.
versus like
Exactly.
one of a kind. And so
Exactly.
yeah, it's so weird though, right? But it's also survival mindset, which I think sometimes toxic work cultures put you in, right? So
Totally. It's
we
all
have to be
connected.
active and we have
It's
to
all
be vigilant for
connected.
our own mindset.
Yeah. Grace has your hand. Grace has her
Yeah.
hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to just add, I think somebody also mentioned it in the chat that um, what and how you delegate, I think plays a role in the trust. Because if you're only delegating minor repetitive tasks, I think it limits trust, and
Mm.
people won't trust your ability to lead. But if you give people the types, if you delegate in a way where people have ownership over the work that's been delegated to them. I think there's a fine line between like a good delegator and a delegator who just gives other people grunt work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
great.
great.
I think you bring up a really great point, and it's true. And I think one of the things in our cohort, our follow-up cohort, Jan and I will definitely go deeper into the topic of delegation, because clearly there's a lot of different layers to this. But Grace, I have like a story for you and an example of that where in my prior positions, I remember my supervisor told me that I was responsible for owning like the implementation of our new CRM tool. But she straight up in a meeting said, okay, Leona's here to help like lead this, but she's not allowed to make any decisions. So any decisions will have to go through me, basically. And
Mm.
I think, it's like great. She gave me this opportunity to lead this project and implementation, but did I really get to lead it if I'm not able to like own the decision making of it, right? So I think you're right. There is something about how and what you decide to delegate that you can be really strategic about when you think about the success of your team. Um, but also seeing it as like different layers in terms of what you can delegate. There's something called like a delegation matrix activity. We didn't get into that in our workshop, but there are definitely things that you can point out. Because it doesn't even have to be just delegating tasks. You can delegate like things to think about, right?
Mhm.
And then that's another way of like strategically positioning like your team member for success because you're having them think about something that maybe can take things off your mind that maybe you would normally think about.
Yeah. Vanessa asked a question. What if,
Yeah.
what do you do if you delegate, but the person is just like, nah, I don't want to do this? Depends on the person. It depends on the task. And you could always go back to them. But I think that's just hilarious because you get that response sometimes. You just do.
Well,
There,
I think that's a leadership opportunity though for
it
you,
is.
right? To how do you
Yeah.
get them to want to say
It
like,
is absolutely. Yes, it is. There's also interesting research around how you ask for help, and one is around if you say, "Can you help me?" versus "You're great at this, and therefore can you help me?" Meaning, like it's a helper versus it's like just do this, help
yeah.
me, versus you're really great at this, and I could really use your help here. That makes a big difference because you're putting them up on a higher level, higher playing fields in their minds, right? So that helps. But you need to be able to know, you need to know that they are actually better than you at this, right? So that requires more conversations, more, relationship building, more interaction.
Oh, I'm gonna be very vulnerable here because I want to frame what you said as being 100% true, but how like we can sabotage that ourselves too.
Mm,
What I mean by that is, so someone told that to me, and I remember I would be like, "Hey Gina, I think you're great at this. Why don't you try this?" And then she would do it, and then I would change everything and not even let her do what she did, right? So nobody wanted to work for me because I was horrible, right? And so I think there's this mindset I did, which um, I have to realize what I create is subjectively the best, not
mhm,
objectively the best. So, and then I have to think in my mind, it's better that I get to see and have my team do it rather than I have to do everything and I get A work done. And what I found was that my team did work and I thought it was B a C and it was really B plus according to my manager. And what I thought was A work was really B
come
minus
on.
work because it just came from me in a way. And so, like,
Yeah.
over time, though, as you learn to become a better leader and you work with other people, like, you become a better leader and you let the doers do the work, and your work actually becomes A plus
Mhm,
because I didn't have to
it
do any of the
does.
work and I've learned to lead other people, right? But it's because I don't know how to lead other people and learn to lead other people. Like, that's why the work was so horrible, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
like it just like what you said is so true, but like what it's really going on, at least for me behind the scenes, was like no one wanted to
It's
do the work.
something, yeah. That's
Yeah.
a leadership learning moment, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like,
So
Aaron,
funny.
forget you. I'm gonna take that away from you, you know? And then that's like it's because I didn't trust Aaron, right? Like it's back
Yeah,
to
right.
back to trust.
Yeah, no. Um, you know, the reality is people, and this is addressing the the question or comment that Aaron has.
Yeah.
How do you test delegation and trusting? There's a thing with trust, right? It's like they have to be competent, they have to have the skills, they have to have the knowledge in order for you to be able to trust that you can delegate to them. But you need to give them a chance. And it could be that there's a scale in terms of is or do you need to give specific like direction versus do you coach? And
Mhm.
you need to figure out where your team is on that scale. Like it may be that this person needs specific direction all the time for 5 times or maybe 5 times, and then you can move them along the coaching scale, meaning Maybe you provide some questions next time. How might you do this differently? Or what other ideas do you have, right? Coaching is very different than telling. So that's what you need to identify for yourself. Going back to Jim's point about like you as a leader having this opportunity to delegate. Think about your team or your colleagues or whoever you're delegating to. Where are they on that scale? And work with them accordingly, right? There's no like one size fits all approach.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Britt mentioned sometimes delegation is the test, and
Yes.
I would just, yeah, acknowledge that to give yourself grace too in becoming a leader. Like you're gonna go in, and if you want to provide that chance for someone, know that it might not always come out 100%, right? You don't know yet whether to give them direct, explicit directions or to provide like a coaching type of style, right? In order to mentor them. But then, for yourself as a leader, this is also an opportunity for you to grow and discover what's going to work best for both of you to continue working together. And the thing is that
Mhm.
everyone is going to be different. Some people respond well to certain coaching methods, certain mentoring styles. And some people respond differently. And I think that's all part of your role as a leader in being able to learn these things about your team and then adapt to that.
absolutely. Erin's got her hand up.
Mhm.
Erin?
Yeah, I just wanted to add because I don't know if I identified a pattern at a certain. I don't want to say age because even Silicon Valley is probably notorious for being the most ageist among women that I've heard of. Like, I can't get hired. I have 20 years of experience in this industry, and I'm like, you should absolutely be hired. It shouldn't count against you. It should be working in your favor, but that's not always the case. And I say that as now someone that's turning 40. 10 years ago, I was 30 and my mentees were 18 to 22 telling me I was too old to have a startup. And then now I have mentors who are maybe 62 billionaires on the Midas list being like, yeah, you need to have 10 years of venture capital and you need much more experience. And this is your retirement age at 65. You don't have enough. Now they're like, no, you actually could. This, you just misunderstood what I said. So there's that factor where the reason I mentioned age is I've been trying to identify this gap commonly based on the stage of someone's career of like, I don't know what it is, but college students that are recent grads, perfect to delegate everything to. They will listen to you. Senior management really set in its ways, but top of their game, super easy. The most difficult is mid-level junior of kind of, I don't want to say you think you're the shit, but you're really not. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. I need someone with 10 more years of experience and getting a lot of resentment. And then I have to turn back the finger that I'm pointing at them to myself, where I was like, well, you got offered an executive producer credit. And they're like, well, actually, we're under new management. You're a little more junior. And I was a little insulted at first. Then I was like, wait, they want someone really senior that'll like write them a $5 million check right now. Can I do that? I was like, if I didn't withdraw my crypto, I'd write them $1 million check. So I said, and I'm a little bit junior. I can wait and be humble, but it's this weird sweet spot that I've been trying to identify. I don't know if anyone else has seen that, or is it just across the board of like delegating is just hard in general, no matter the stage? For me, it tends to be like junior mid-level thinking you're the shit of like, I'm going to be promoted. I'm so dope. And then being like, well, actually, you're really just not humble. Or that's just me.
Yeah,
Well,
we have a yeah.
well, I was gonna
Sorry, Jim.
say, like, part of this, Aaron, is what Jan and Leon are gonna do next, right? Like, so they have a cohort, they
Mhm.
kind of dropped about it. And part of this, though, is like Aaron, right? Like, we could talk about this, we could share our thoughts till our face comes blue. And there's tons of books, right? And I'm sure there's great
Yeah.
YouTube videos with people better looking than I that you probably want to listen to. But like the reality is, it's just informative, but it doesn't really help us to do it, right? So, Aaron,
Yeah.
great question. Like, how do we do this, Jan? And specifically, right? Like, these are all great frameworks, but maybe my situation is like Aaron's, or like Allison has a different situation, or Grace has different something different. Like, how do we go from consciousness to competency? And
Mhm.
tell me, like, how does a cohort work with that?
Yeah, yeah, thanks. I'm so happy that Aaron asked that question because it segued into this. Because every single question that's come up, there's a whole string of things we could do to address those questions that came up during the chat, during our interactions with one another. But the way the cohort is structured, and we'll share a timeline after this slide, but it's really to build upon these three concepts that we shared, which is around positive, healthy organizational cultures, effective delegation among team members, and then you yourself, and making sure that we take care of you. You take care of you, right? So those are the three concepts that we're really wanting for you to think about, gain deeper insights, and there'll be opportunities to have small group learning where we can dig deeper into a particular topic, and then also personalized one-on-one coaching. So that's what the framework is, and then the timeline that we have shared, we have prepared is around, there's a kickoff in January, February, and then it runs through the end of, or the beginning of May. And you can see here, there's group coaching, and it's around influence. There's individual coaching to further dive deeper into the topic of influence or something else that's coming up as it relates to influence that you're having trouble with. And then there's, again, individual coaching and taking frameworks and taking tailored approaches to you as you think about how do you become the leader that you want to become, or how do you address some of those friction points that you're experiencing as we get into the months of April or February, March. There's going to be stuff happening during that time, I'm sure. And then the next is around having a group session and individual coaching around collaborative conversations. And again, talking more about how do you delegate? How do you delegate in environments where people are resistant, where you don't know who you can give stuff to because you haven't built that trust yet? And then the timing of part two is, again, individual coaching. And this is the framework that we're going to follow, but the descriptions below individual coaching or group session, it might change depending on what comes up in part one of our cohort. So it's an 8-week program. We haven't, aligned on the exact days, like the date or the time, but this is like the week, kind of the time frame that we're working with. So that's what we have planned for the follow-up cohort.
Yeah,
Leona, is there anything? Yeah, or Jim,
you'll
anything to
send out
add?
more information on the specifics as
Yes.
we kind of land on that.
Yeah,
I think what's
exactly.
most important is like you author the specifics of this, right? So these are just frameworks that will help
Yeah,
shape things to help you identify maybe things in your workspace or in your leadership that can help to then realize like, oh, I didn't realize that's what you meant by this situation. And it's starting to bring your own
exactly.
experiences into it, right?
Yeah,
Sorry, Leona,
great.
did you
Yeah.
want to add?
No, I think that was great. Thank you, Jan, and Jim. I think for this cohort style learning experience, the beauty of it. So we covered a lot today. I think there was a lot of questions, and again, Jan, Jim, and I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. So I think the cohort experience will allow you to be in community with others that might be experiencing the same thing, that are trying to grow in a similar way. So you'll have the opportunity to not only, work with Jan and I, but to learn through other peers across the industry, in addition to receiving that individualized coaching too, because we recognize that leadership isn't like a one size fits all.
Mhm.
So we really want to create that experience for all of you to gain some clarity around what first being a leader means for you, and then dive into kind of the nuances around like, okay, how can we work, what kind of habits, what kind of frameworks and exercises can we work with you on in order to help achieve those goals.
Yep.
And just for clarity, Aaron asked, like, this is not a program that you have to be a SACE member to be in. So it's open to all. So if you're watching the webinar or you're here, and you don't have a membership, it is open to you. And I think what's most important for some of us, maybe having challenges in your leadership, one of the tools that we've created at SACE is to really empower you through these different type of processes. So what we created was a chat bot. And I know there's chat bots all over the place, and AI has really definitely landed in 2025. But what I wanted to share with you was a link. And this is, in a way, your personal, let's say, leadership advisor. So What this is to demonstrate, and I kind of like already inputted a lot of information here to help you, manage the time to have to not do this. But let's say you get a 360 evaluation, you'll have a performance review, and maybe your company did strength finders or someone did like, SDI, Myers-Briggs, or DISC analysis, right? There's always some type of thing out there. And you got this performance review, and they're like, you know what? You thought you were going to get, let's say, a 70. You thought you were going to get a 90. You got a 70, and you self-rated yourself as 80 because you didn't want to seem like you're bragging, right? But there's still a gap. And what they're basically saying is you have to improve, and we want you to be better. But the reality is, our managers aren't really in charge of our career development, nor are they in charge of our leadership. And a lot of times, you have to go find it yourself. And it could kind of feel like, I don't know, managing your 401k. It's up to you to manage your future finances, but you're not a financial advisor. You don't know how to pick stocks and you don't know what to do. And so what we did was create this STEM Connect Leadership Training Advisor. And what it does is it creates, we programmed it over 150 pages of frameworks. It has things that we believe that you will need to accentuate on in leadership and bridge that conversation of what you feel you need to what objectively your company is trying to tell you you need through this feedback, and then help you to propose what you think would be best for you in order to achieve the goals that your company has. So what I did here was I inputted, these 3 documents that they gave me to help me to be a better leader. And I wrote here like what I think I am struggling with. And you can write whatever you want to. And what it will do is help you to understand and communicate what is it that we just talked about today? How is the cohort going to help you and why that is the case? So in this section, it's helping you to understand what are all those documents saying? Like, how does it synthesizing it in a way to help you understand what you're going through and what your leadership situation is? And then from here, it'll tell you like, well, here is the cohort that they're doing. And this was their conference session, which our webinar is talking about. And these are specifically the frameworks that we put in that it's going to identify as your leadership competencies that would be really helpful to work on. So maybe it's relationships, leadership presence, and also mental wellness in what you do. And why this is good to the company, and I think that's really hard for a lot of people to maybe share, is like, I want to learn this not only for yourself to do your own job and maybe for your own sanity, but this is the value that it brings back to the organization. Like, this is why you want to sponsor me. Give me time and give me funding so I can do this for our business. And then also like a lot of times it's like, how do I write this and how do I tell this to my manager? Well, it's going to build a script for you. Like, this is a conversation you can have with your manager to kind of break the ice. Maybe you could throw it into your one-on-one conversation and like help you to at least move forward in your career. And this in ways like, hey, this is what you told me to do. This is what I saw. I think I needed, and this is why I want to take this so I can address those concerns that you said in my evaluation. And then you could talk to it and ask more things, which is I really love about this. For example, you can say, I want to be up for a promotion next year. So if I want to become a people leader, why is this also going to be important? Because my boss is, pushing me to get promoted, but can't promote me because of these performance reviews. Just put that in there, right? Just like whatever you're thinking in the middle of the night, it's not going to complain back to you, and it will tell you like more information to help you to answer those questions that you have. And specifically as a people leader, why is this important? And what are the different frameworks and why, what this means for you and how they're going to build it in the workshop that they're doing. So hopefully this is empowering for you, because I felt like when I was an employee, it was very disempowering for me to get all that
Mhm.
feedback and not know how to self-advocate as well as to grow in what I want to do. And, if anything, this tool is to kind of bridge that gap for you. Jan, Leonna, anything else on that or?
No, this was great. And we're right on time. So
Yeah.
I'm super happy about that. And I'm happy that we were all able to get together today. It was great to hear from you, see you, and read your chats and all that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here, attending, your participation. Thank you, Jim, for moderating this conversation too.
Yeah, thanks everyone for
Awesome.
being here. Yeah, so if you have any other further questions, Jan and Leona, they had their emails in the chat
Yep.
box. Mine was there as well. But we're so glad you're here. And hopefully, if anything, this inspires you that despite your challenging workplaces, maybe some bad culture that you're around, that you
Mm-hmm.
aren't beholden to it. There are things that you can do to
Mm-hmm.
move yourself from just being stuck as a doer, but really a leader, not only of the work but as well as the culture that is around. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
and we hope to
you.
see
Thank
you
you.
again in the future.
Bye. Take care.